Managing Director of Management Consulted, and I'm here today to talk about consulting resume pitfalls. I'm going to do this in two ways. I'm going to walk through a before and an after resume that we reviewed and that we edited, and give you some of the insights on how we applied some of the insights that we've shared with you. And then I'm going to highlight three key areas that we see as common pitfalls to help you avoid them. So first, the before and after. This before and after is for an undergraduate student that we edited their resume. The before version had problems with all three of the areas that we've covered: the format, the anatomy or the structure, and the wording. And on the left-hand side, you'll see some of these things. For the format, his format had very large margins, but no white space in between the actual entries. So we made sure to address that when we went through the edit. On the right-hand side, you'll see that we have 0.5 inch margins that are equal all around, as well as white space in between each one of the entries. We did some more with formatting as well. We looked at the font, and we said his font had too many different font sizes, and the fonts weren't clear enough in order to understand. So we picked one of our common fonts, and we put the document into that. On the left-hand side, you'll also see in terms of structure that there are two key areas that both focus on leadership. One of them is called leadership and development. The other is called campus and community involvement. And in the consulting world, the two of those are the same things. Those are leadership experiences. So what we did is we went through, and after recreating each one of the entries into a format that made more sense, was more clear, and had white space in between it, we began to do some rearranging. And we didn't only touch those two sections, we actually went to the experience section as well, because we discovered that in the experience section there were some things that we believed were more like leadership, and in the leadership section there were things that we believed were more like work experience. So we made sure that we rearranged them in a way that made the most sense. We included 2 key leadership experiences and 4 key work experiences. We highlighted those with great detail, and the remainder of everything else that previously had been highlighted, we reduced to bullet size format. We put some of them in the bottom in the personal section and some of them in the top under the university experience. That way we were really able to highlight the more important brand name experiences without losing track of some of the key leadership experiences. The final thing that we did was we looked at every word and every line of the resume. And as we did this, we recognized that there was a lot of context missing, so we didn't necessarily understand what was happening in each of the roles that this person was playing. And in addition, we also recognized that there were a lot of numbers that were missing. Quantification is important throughout the document. We need to see a number in every line. So it's essential that we went through and we identified where some of those missing areas were, and we worked with the client to make sure that they were able to fill in these missing areas. In total, we were able to make a complete transformation of the resume, and the overall effect is that even though there seems like there's a little less on the resume on the right-hand side, the effect is more powerful because it's much clearer and easier to see exactly what he brings to the table. There are 3 common pitfalls on top of these things that we've just talked about that we'd like to highlight for you today. And these are just questions that we get all the time that it's helpful to answer here. One of the questions is that we have 2-page, 1-page, and then any other page numbers of resumes. Anything longer than a 2-page resume really is not appropriate for consulting. Even if a consulting firm says, don't worry about it, send in a long resume, it is not to your advantage to send them a 3, 5, 7, or even a 15-page resume, which we have received in our editing process. The core focus here is really on making sure that you highlight what some of the key examples are that you bring to the table, and not necessarily everything that you've done. You want to dedicate the most experience to the things that will be the most important to the consulting firm. If you are an undergraduate, whether you're in the US or international, it's less common to have a 2-page resume. It's more likely that you will only have a 1-page resume. If you have an advanced degree, or if you have more than 5 to 10 years of work experience, then it can be also an appropriate time to have a 2-page resume. Our goal, though, is that unless you've had substantial and repeated multiple experiences at different jobs, that you try to focus on a 1-page resume for consulting. It will be more advantageous for you throughout the entire process. The second thing that's important is that you focus on the format of your resume. And the format for consulting resumes is never skills-based. The consulting firms are not interested in seeing the same types of things that you did for different jobs. They're interested in hearing everything in a story, which is why chronological format is important, and actually it's reverse chronological in each section. So what I mean by that is that they don't want to see necessarily that you have this skill that you employed at this job and this skill that you employed at this job. They don't want to see all of those grouped together. They want to see in the context of the job and the performance and the time that you were there exactly what you were doing. So just make sure that you focus on some of those core things. The third and final piece is that you want to remove irrelevant experience from your resume. A lot of people feel beholden to telling the whole truth and every part of the truth, and that's not necessarily the way that the resume goes. Of course, you can never lie or misrepresent anything on your resume, but there are times where it's appropriate to simply remove experience if it doesn't convey the right type of attitude or the right type of mental image. For example, if you were working in a highly unprofessional environment, let's say at a summer camp, an experience that is valuable, it may have taught you some leadership skills, but just doesn't convey the images that you want them to be imagining, you might want to actually remove that from your document. In addition, if you worked in food service anywhere, those can be common roles that we'll remove from the document. The really key focus here is on the relevant experience that you bring to the table. And it's not becoming as common to fill every gap on your resume. A lot of people are taking time, a few months or even a year, to travel in between jobs. So it's not necessarily important to explain every single step along the way. You just don't want to leave huge gaping holes. If you're a student, in fact, you have no holes to explain because the main thing that you're considered to be doing full-time are your studies. Everything else is kind of alongside your studies as well. So just make sure you're picking the experience that puts you in the best light and really conveys what the consulting firms are interested in seeing. So across the board, we know that we'll probably answer a number of questions and leave you with others. We invite you to visit us at our website, managementconsulted.com, and feel free to submit your questions or even work with us on a resume edit or a resume review. We'd love to answer your personal questions. And in the meantime, if you have multiple questions that you can get answered on the website, we invite you to visit all of our free resources that are available to you 24/7. Thanks again for joining. This is managementconsulted.com.